The film we are going to watch today talks about the reconstruction of events, but in fact about how propaganda alternative reality was created by the Romanian communist authorities, here with the help of the secret police. Today's choice of the topic is meant to explore further the subject of the temporary exhibition open in October at the House of European History. Fake for Real, a history of forgery and falsification. It touches upon judicial crimes committed by the totalitarian regimes in Europe. But the forging evidence and violation of the rights to fair trial have a longer history. The archival documents linked with the Dreyfus affair, which we present in the exhibition Fake for Real, show a very sophisticated and perfidious argumentation of the investigators in order to frame their victim. In the increasingly anti-Semitic atmosphere of the late 19th century Europe, Dreyfus, of Jewish and Alsatian origins, was accused of selling French military secrets to Germans. According to a graphologist, Alphonse Bertillon, although the handwriting from the document in question was unlike that of Dreyfus, he faked it to avoid any suspicions. Having been found guilty, Dreyfus suffered military degradation and imprisonment. He was released thanks to the public debate. Émile Zola relaunched the Dreyfus affair with his explosive open letter, where he denounced high-ranking French officers, accusing them of falsifying evidence. In 1960, there was no one to shout, "J'accuse." The case we are going to follow today does not have a happy ending. After nearly 50 years, we are still not able to answer some of the questions. The director of the film tries to shed light on what has happened, taking up the role of the intellectuals and the civil society to remind us how important the safeguard of the human rights is also today. Thank you.
Dear all, welcome to tonight's screening of the Great Communist Bank Robbery by Alexandru Solomon. In 1959, the National Bank of Romania was robbed and 1.6 million lei, the then equivalent of 2,000 monthly salaries, was stolen. At the time, Communist Romania was a socialist state and a crime and huge as this one. It was an American-style heist. It was not a narrative that fits a low crime rate. The authorities quickly investigation and made sure that within due time, the robbers were found and tried in court. So far, so good. But what makes this case stand out is that the robbers, before they were executed, were asked or forced to play themselves in a reenactment of the crime in a state-ordered documentary by Virgil Calotescu called Reconstruction from 1960. The film was meant to be shown to party members, possibly as a warning. Ironically, this film, in which they had appeared as themselves, would eventually be used against them, as the fictional reconstruction became the official version of the facts. This, in essence, fake documentary did have one truthful scene. It's the chilling moment when the accused six are actually convicted. The Great Communist Bank Robbery starts from this 1960 film, but adds new research and perspectives. At every turn, the story becomes more fascinating and strange, because it turns out that all six convicts were once prominent party members in the socialist regime. Also, they were all Jewish. Was their conviction a reckoning? Were there anti-Semitic motives? And why had they actually committed the crime in the first place, if that was the case? Because why would anyone rob a bank in a communist country where there was nowhere to spend your money, nothing to buy, and nowhere to go? What Solomon's film shows is that asking the right questions does not necessarily facilitate the truth. As Solomon has astutely observed, every documentary filmmaker interrogates or investigates what he or she sees before him. The documentary filmmaker puts the evidence of a particular reality on trial, so to speak. So in a way, the Great Communist Bank Robbery becomes something of a retrial of the first showy one. Surely Solomon's film also reconstructs the crime, just like the film that was made in 1960, but he uses different methods, and his strategy is investigative instead of ideological. Solomon has stated that he considers it his duty as a filmmaker as well as a citizen to come clean with the past, but he has found people in general to be reluctant to address the past. And it is not just people's unwillingness or unease he has been confronted with. He writes, quote, "Although the socialist past is not that distant in history, it has become very difficult to grasp its significance. Not only are we working amidst misconceptions, but the sources that we can use are not trustworthy. We rely on archive documents, be they written or filmed, and on people. And we all know that there is no reason to trust either people or documents." End quote. These are compelling remarks coming from a documentary filmmaker. Does the Great Communist Bank Robbery crack the mystery? Does it provide final answers? And was that ever the point? After the screening, I will talk to Alexandru Solomon, the director. Please stay tuned. You can submit your questions in the online chat during the film, but also during our talk. But first, enjoy this fascinating piece of history and film history, and I'll see you afterwards.
The system that was put in place was pretty chaotic for a long time. So between these two extremes, obviously, there's a lot of nuances. Nowadays, there's a lot of people who haven't lived any time under communism, so this is pretty abstract for them. And it's a pity that the educational system doesn't do anything about this, meaning that I think, the communist period is probably the slimmest part in the history manual in high school, just at the end. And it's still, it's either, totally rejected, I think, by the younger generations because they think this is an old thing and, it's just old people that talk about this, can't keep about, talking about this. But on the other hand, this transmission of authoritarian culture is still, present. And it is being transmitted because of the lack of discussion and debating about real debating about communism. So, yeah.
Do you think that maybe that fiction in general, fiction, film, or literature, or arts in general, and documentaries have a responsibility to address this past, or to work on some kind of representation, direct or indirect?
I felt that I had the responsibility, but this is a personal thing. I mean, you cannot tell people, artists or filmmakers, you have to do this because this would be, propaganda again.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the first, 10, 20 years of filmmaking on communism was pretty black and white and pretty, simplistic. Which it's another explanation why people are rejecting the subject. They say, "Oh, again, a film about communism." So, but when I made, for instance, this one, the Great Communist Bank Robbery, the situation was pretty different because I was lucky to go into the Securitate archives, and I was probably one of the first filmmakers to be able to get access there. The access was not allowed for 12, 13 years in these archives, imagine this. So how can you do a debate of the communist regime if you don't have access to the documents?
No.
And while we were filming, this college that is now managing the Securitate archives was being founded. This is like 16 years ago, 17 years ago. So this is the climate where I made the film, and this explains maybe why it is like this.
Are cases coming to light by the study of this Institute of the Securitate files? And I wondered when I saw it in your film, how easily decodable are these documents? Are they very just in black and white what happened, or did you notice maybe a kind of a way of describing things that hides certain elements?
I think, referring to your first question, there were a lot of important research being done on these archives by the researchers at the CNSAS, that's its acronym, of this college, and by what other researchers did with this material. It's a huge amount of material, and they keep receiving more from the secret services as it is declassified, you know. On the other hand, it is very difficult to treat these documents, because you never know if these documents were written to influence somebody or to produce garbage on him and to discredit, or if it's a real thing, or, you know, they were all, you always have to keep in mind, what are you reading, who wrote it, and why, you know, what is the reason. But this is probably valid for any archive. In this case, in my case, for this film, the files were really, you know, like a school program for understanding the Securitate, because you had so many different layers of documents. There were the documents that were written by the inquirers, by the investigators themselves. Then you had the declarations of the people who were indicted in different circumstances. And then you had these informations written by people who were staying in the same cells with the detainees, which were, I would suppose, you know, a bit more real than the rest of the things, because it was based on a real experience and what the guys were saying, let's say, when they felt a little bit safer in the cell, not in front of the investigator. So you had to navigate through all this, and I don't know if I did well, but it's a pretty dangerous water.
Yes, in the way you were reconstructing yourself, but from different materials, of course, and with a different strategy or purpose. A different question. While I was researching your film and Romanian cinema in general, I came across a very famous film in Romania, but not to me, by Lucian Pintili. I hope I pronounced it correctly, which is called The Re-enactment, which was immediately caught my eye, of course. I wonder, because that film was from 1968, is it a possibility? I'm not sure if you have the answer to this question, but could he have been aware of, or could he have seen Reconstruction, the film? And is this some kind of dialogue between the two, or maybe reenactments were a common strategy in crime files?
I'm sure that both the screenwriter and the director knew about the bank robbery and the reenactment. I'm not sure that they've seen the film, but I remember I asked Mr. Pintilie if he knew about the case and stuff, and that was the case. It wasn't so. I mean, this is the only filmed reenactment of a trial that I know in Romanian communism. In other parts of the communist world, I think they did it more often in Soviet Union, or not in this kind of fictional reenactment, but in other ways, in the film trials were a tradition, no? Yes, but this, I think there is an echo in Mr. Pintilie's film, and yeah, it's a film that influenced a lot the film world and culture in Romania.
And it's, in a way, I thought, maybe daring to be making a film like that. Of course, it's not a direct, you say it's an echo. It's a good way to think about it. Just maybe for the audience who haven't seen or don't know about this film, the reenactment, the film that we're talking about, is about two boys who have committed a crime, and then they have to, instead of being punished, they have to reenact for a camera crew the crime. So in that way, it's it's relevant to Mr. Solomon's film. And the film that you reacted upon, of course, the film from 1960. Would you would you mind if I thought of your film as, like I said before, something that's also a reconstruction, but a reconstruction with a different method, that you're more an investigator instead of an ideological agent somehow proposing a certain truth? Or do you dislike the term investigation?
No, I don't dislike it. I mean, investigator sounds bad enough, but
Sorry.
In the sense that it becomes too close to the police apparatus. But investigation is a genre in itself, so difficult to avoid it. The problem is that I had is that at some point, film needs a sort of narrative closure in the classical formats. No, people need to look at a story that has a meaning, it has an end, and in the end they get a reward because you get a story that explains life. No, that's the and in this case, at some point I realized that I will not be able to explain life in the classical way. This happened because of this and then because there were, first of all, different narrative layers in the reality, and the real question was not about did this happen or not, did they do the bank robbery or not, and all this, because this is forever, in my eyes, totally covered by the manipulation and the propaganda of the Securitate and the regime. But the closure, if there is any closure in this film, it's about, coming to terms with this process of manipulation, and making it turn it against itself. That's the only closure that I could get for myself and for the audience in the end. And maybe it's not satisfactory enough, but that's how life is, and this is more true to life in terms of what we have been living in post-communism.
Yeah, I thought that what you're saying right now is very relevant to our times, just questioning whatever you are seeing, whatever kind of reconstruction or explanation of so-called facts in these times when we're in some sort of a any kind of truth era. I have a couple of questions from the audience. I'll ask you the first one and I'll read it to you. So the question is, do Romanian people today hold memory of this event? I think the robbery. And in what way is it remembered? As the propagandic film depicted them as criminals, or are there more narratives about it now? There are lots of questions here.
Yeah. Well, the generations that were adult at the time of the robbery, they surely remember. And many people who were, let's say, higher educated or working in, closer to the party circles or whatever, which had 4 million members, so it wasn't that difficult to be close to the party. Have seen the film even then, and I think they remember it through this lens of their memory, which is totally extraordinary fact, totally blurred by propaganda, and like a huge political trial, Then, of course, people who are younger and were younger than this have never experienced these times, and they have heard about the robbery either through my film or through there was a fiction film directed by Nae Karanfil based on the same story but in a looser way. So I don't know if they look at it as the same way as the older people.
Somebody is asking, why was the execution scene not included?
in the film, in the old film, I guess, in the archive.
Yes, in the archive.
Yeah. I think, you know, executions are tough to watch. And even for that regime, they probably feared that this would, you know, make the people that were on the going to be shot sympathetic, that the audience would feel for them, even if they knew that, even if they believed they were robbers and so on. But I think this is why they avoided showing the actual shoot.
Yeah.
Which, of course, leaves a lot of uncharted conspiracy theories that they weren't shot, that they weren't executed, and so on, you know. But this is the legacy of this kind of secretive regimes, is this, that they are letting us live with the doubts and the darkness.
It's all in the shadows, you never know. Somebody would like to know, she's quoting the director of reenactments in the documentary, who said that it's obvious that the filmmakers will make the reality more striking, for example, the apartments. And if we continue remaking the events, maybe we will reach a perfection one day. And she wonders, what does Mr. Solomon think about this statement?
I think it was very cynical of him to say that. And on the other hand, it is reflecting, you know, not only the conception of people who were working for the police, or, you know, filmmakers who were working for the police, who thought that they should put more evidence in the frame that these people are really robbers and corrupt people and whatever. But it reflects a sort of, you know, old school Soviet style cinema conception that says, you know, you have to push for the expression, you have to, you know, work with a very broad marker to, you know, reinforce reality. Which is why they placed all these things in the drawers there, like, you know, you can see a skull. The guy would never have a skull in his safe there in his apartment. But what I think about it, I'm not, you know, so solidaire with this in any way. Yeah.
Yes. Another question from the audience: were they ever declared innocent after the fall of the communist regime? So the people executed? No.
And this is, I mean, I'm sure the families would be, you know, relieved in a way, and it would make them justice if they would be declared not guilty. But there's a fine line between, because obviously what they, in my understanding of the facts, if they did the bank robbery in a normal world, they wouldn't be, you know, they wouldn't go through such a cruel, torturous investigation and then be executed.
Yeah.
After being promised that they will get away with it. So if there would be, and there's two things. So there's the moral thing that is weighing on the families, I think. You know, your parents were robbers.
Yeah.
So they feel, I think they feel bad about that. And but robbing a bank in communist times, it's not the same thing as you would rob one now. It's not I don't think it's the same moral weight in any way. I think in their case it was a political gesture, crazy maybe, you know,
symbolic, activist,
symbolic, irresponsible in some ways, but not corrupt and immoral as robbing a bank, and even, you know, robbing a bank.
Yeah.
But so this is one thing, and then the execution and the fact that they were killed in this way. would deserve sort of historical reparation, but I don't think judicially this is possible.
No. There's a film made by the daughter of Sebiano, Irene Lutzig.
Granddaughter.
The granddaughter, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. The Reconstruction.
A more personal documentary. So there's no actual declaration of their innocence, but maybe through cinema there's a way of dealing with the trauma and maybe coming to some different conclusions.
It's a very nice film also. It's a very different film, but a very nice, interesting film.
Yeah, and it's also called Reconstruction.
Reconstruction.
Another question. Lots of questions here tonight. The people involved in the trial and the fake film did not seem to show any remorse for being a part of their sentencing, of sentencing people to death. Is this a correct interpretation?
Yeah, there's no remorse.
Mm-hmm.
There's no remorse, and you can understand this in several ways, but there's no social blaming for this. I mean, there was not. And it was okay for people to, at this time in 2003, when I made the film, to, expose this kind of beliefs. And this is really a big shame but this is about the Romanian society. It's not about themselves, because people don't repent like this, one day they wake up in the morning and they repent for everything they did in their life. It has to be a sort of social blame for this.
Yeah.
And if this is non-existent or too faint, it doesn't happen.
Yes, maybe also not a lack of remorse, but also still a belief in the system. Like the judge and the Securitate officer, still believing that they had, done their job right. So that's...
Yes, because it's beyond thinking that communist ideals were okay, which is still valid in different parts of the world. And it's not about seeing communism as a sort of more just system that does social justice. It's about seeing communism as an authoritarian regime where the state is always right, and the citizens are just, treated like pawns, and they can be killed or manipulated. And so this is, in my view, what the investigator and the judge say. They just worked for this system that allowed them to treat citizens in this. And this is, for democracy, is a legacy that is poisoning.
It's like an army kind of psychology or reasoning. If it's an order, you just do it. You're part of a chain, and there's never any actual responsibility. Another question for you, Mr. Solomon. Did the Securitate agents you interviewed talk to the other people from the movie who were present to the projection of the film? I'm talking about the Nazis, all them together. Was there a dialogue? And she mentions also, thank you, great movie.
Thank you. Well, yes, I had this idea that they should talk. And that I organized, after the screening of the Reconstruction, which I did in the same documentary studios which produced the old film. I organized a sort of debate which I tried to moderate between all these people from different walks of life. And I filmed it, I told it that I want to be this sort of closure, bringing everybody in the same room, the cops, the Securitate guys, the judge, the people who suffered, the detainees, the families. And it was such a shameful experience for me, because again, the officers and the regime people, they dominated the discussion totally. And they got away with it, in a sense,
Yeah.
It was really striking. And the people that were on the other side, like the victims and the families, people from the families, they couldn't resist this because they were still maybe, mentally terrorized by these guys or inhibited or whatever. And it was not, I didn't expect this at all, and I couldn't treat it myself as being a sort of prosecutor on the spot. So, yeah, it was a bad idea, and I didn't edit it in the end.
It is a fascinating, and it's a sad story that these power structures, in a sense, were still in place, and that they were not able. I mean, maybe it's impossible to change them.
It was possible, but it meant that the society and then the state, because of the public pressure, would institute a sort of justice system that would, clean the state from this kind of, and establish some personal responsibilities, because there was a general sense that things were bad.
Yeah.
Because of Securitate was bad, but who was bad? Put a name on this and the face. Whenever they tried to put a name on the face, things got blocked,
That's the genius of the system, probably why it worked so well.
No, it's not that abstract. It's the genius of the people who are happy with this kind of networks, in the end, because everybody benefits in a way, less or more, or not everybody, but I'm exaggerating, but a lot of people.
Enough people, yeah.
Yeah, enough people benefit.
Another question from the audience. It was finally the robbery about Jews? ?
Not only, but it was about Jews, obviously, because they had this, I think the robbers had this revived conscience of being Jews, not because of them, because they were internationalists and, people who tried to assimilate a lot, but because of the social pressure put on them and the political atmosphere and the fact that they were eliminated from the nomenclatura slowly. And it's one part of the story.
Would you say that is there another, or is there a history of maybe anti-Semitic feeling in Romania, or not at all?
Sure. There is, as everywhere in Europe.
Yeah, but maybe striking in, say, high.
But Romania was an ally of Hitler during the war for 4 years.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And the Communist Party absorbed a lot of people from the far-right organizations. That's what they did in the first place. After the war was over, the Communist Party was, they had 1,000 members, out of which half were Jewish and Hungarians probably. And then they had to build a big party, so they let everybody in, including the Nazis or the local fascists.
Yeah.
That's how it was done. And then national communism absorbed a lot of the old national far-right ideology from before the war. Ceausescu was a big reader of things, written by former nationalists.
Okay.
It's not
fascinating and interesting at the same time.
History is a lot about continuity.
Yes.
As it is about rupture.
Well, they should teach it more in schools.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience. Were there prosecutions later on against those who took part in this trial?
Prosecutions, I assume, on the people that were on the side of the prosecution then.
Prosecutors, maybe investigators.
No, I mean, as I said, these people that are participating in my film, the investigator-in-chief and the other people, the judge, they have never been questioned at the time I'm filming them, and this is why they speak so freely now. Yeah. Nobody was investigated at the time. So only after, and I remember this because I was, it seemed to me very funny and sad in a way. I got a call from from an organization that wanted to indict Mr. Enoiu, and the prosecutor's office wanted to indict him after my film was done, and they asked me for his address. Which I found. I got Mr. Enoiu's contacts from the phone book.
Yeah. Okay.
Why would the prosecutor's office wouldn't open the phone book?
Yeah.
And there was no, in political pressure or vision to, point to this responsibility, even for things that were even more clearer politically, because in this case you could say, okay, they robbed a bank, what do you expect?
Yeah.
It was a tough system, they killed them. But there were people who went to prison for nothing, just for saying one word. And there was not, up until a few years ago, there were no trials of these guys. And I would like to mention that yesterday I was in a meeting because it was the 35th anniversary of the death of Gheorghe Ursu, who was an engineer and a writer, and he was killed by the Securitate in 85, so in the last years of Ceausescu. And nowadays, 35 years after, we know the people who have investigated him, beaten him to death, and they are free.
Yeah.
And Gheorghe Ursu's son has been trying for the past 30 years to get a sort of justice for his father's memory. It's not possible yet.
Not yet. But it will be in a near future or in a future that will be possible, or will it have?
It's going to be post-mortem anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Because nobody will be, alive anymore.
No. I have a question, and it's something that I read in a book by Professor Dominic Nasta. She's a professor. She's written about Romanian cinema, contemporary cinema. And she says that she cites, quote, the willingness to laugh at one's own misfortunes and one's own bad luck. And she says that's typically Romanian. Would you agree?
Well, I'm always reluctant about these, ethnic specificities,
Yeah.
I mean, you could say this about Belgians, I think.
Yeah.
Would you? No? You could say it about Bulgarians.
No, we don't have a sense of humor.
Oh, you have a big sense of humor, to my knowledge. And it's always auto-ironic, and no?
Yes.
Or it used to be, in the good times.
Yeah.
So, and I think you can say it about Bulgarians or Serbs or you name it.
Yeah.
There are differences, cultural differences, but they're not stable like this, written in stone. Romanians are like this and Belgians are the other way around.
But maybe in cinema, maybe let's narrow down the statement and say that maybe in cinema there is some room for humor, even if the subject is quite dark
humor, yeah, I think so. There is some sarcasm.
Yeah.
But this is more of a cultural thing. It's not a Romanian thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a final question, and it's also from the audience. And the question is, if history is about continuity, where do you see this story being continued today? You were talking about
the story.
Yes.
I don't know. I think if there are things to learn today, it's about this deep fake thing that we're living nowadays. I mean, when you look at the old Reconstruction, the film that they did in 1960, no, sane person today would believe it, I think. We're so well equipped against this gross manipulation nowadays, which is good because it means that we have exercised this kind of reading of pictures and TV and moving images that were much less vulnerable today than we were 60 years ago. On the other hand, manipulation itself has grown into much more sophisticated forms today, and that's the, if you want, the continuation. People will lie as long as they live, and for political reasons, of course. And now the media are much more sophisticated and pervasive, and with the online thing,
yeah,
for sure. So continuation. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Solomon, thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting, very enlightening.
My pleasure.
The audience at home, please join us next week for a silent film program with live piano by Noah van Nabelen. We will screen some short films, and they will be followed by the Battle of the Somme. So I hope to see you next week. Thank you very much for staying with us.
Thank you.